evening, everyone. And here we are tonight with Shop-Ware. We have Roxanne. Up in the top left, we have the one and only Bryn Klein. And we have Miss Carolyn down there with her fabulous background. Shop-Ware t-shirt. So let's begin.
Mary, thank you so much for having us. We are so excited to be proud sponsors of ASA Florida, but also to have an opportunity to present and share some content with the ASA Florida members. This has been a really exciting opportunity for us, and we look forward to doing it more in partnership.
Absolutely.
I am thrilled to be joined by Brin Kline from Assured Autoworks. I'll give Bryn an opportunity to introduce himself. But Bryn has been obviously an outspoken supporter of ASA Florida, and as always has been an outspoken advocate for the industry and for professionals. And it's always an honor to spend time with you, Bryn. So thanks for being here with us.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Excited.
So I have got a presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So tonight's event is called Service Writing 2.0, Maximizing Your Value to Customers. Obviously, we service write on a daily basis. I've been doing this presentation a couple times through the spring, talking about some of the aspects that make Shop-Ware special and what Shop-Ware can do for you that others cannot. And it really has to do with how you're presenting value to your customers, not only through what you say, but how you say it. And we've got some examples both from my shop and from Bryn's shop here, sort of take you through what that looks like. When we think about why people patronize our businesses, why people pay you, it's because first of all, you fix their car. Second of all, you do so at an affordable price. And third, you treat them with respect. You need all three of these things to do the job right. But what's remarkable is that when we focus on our service writing and we focus a lot on management training, there's an awful lot of emphasis on pricing and on other aspects of the customer's experience that we overlook the fact that what is number one, the first thing that has to happen is that you have to fix their car. If you don't fix their car, none of the other stuff matters. And they don't really know that you fix their car just by nature of the check engine light turning off, right? So how do you showcase what you're actually doing on the car so that they can appreciate you and they can pay you, and then they can write you a 5-star review. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So when you show your customer how you fix their car, you get paid. You're going to have higher average ticket, and that's for both checking the car as well as repairing the car. And that's really important because there's a lot of emphasis on digital vehicle inspections and some of the other stuff that we do up front before the jobs are sold. But the reality is that you want to make sure that you're talking about that value from start, middle, and end of the repair, not just for the inspection, not just for the upsell, but all the way through. We'll show you how to do that. And then also, this is how you satisfy your customers. So when you tell the story so the customer can understand the work that you do, then they can value it. If you don't tell them, they don't have an opportunity to do that. So here's a classic example of how we oftentimes will write service. Over here on the left-hand side, the service title is called MWL. So the customer doesn't know what MWL is. We do, of course, but this is where we start to have this disconnect in terms of how we're presenting our work to our customers. And then under MWL, we have some customer states notes. So it's fairly generic. It says customer states, that same acronym is on. Pulled codes found P0171, tested oxygen sensor found bad, replaced oxygen sensor, cleared codes. And then there's a line for parts. And this whole thing, this MWL, whatever that means, cost the customer $855. Okay, for folks that are used to like writing their services based on customer states and just kind of summarizing what she did. This is probably really familiar and this would be fun. The reality though is that this is not doing you a good service. This is actually making it difficult for the customer to appreciate what the heck they spent $855 for. And what you see over here on the right is the alternative that we are going to be talking about here today. So over here on the right-hand side, you see the same thing, but instead first we're actually calling out the diagnosis for the warning light on. It's called warning light on. It's not a acronym. Oftentimes we use acronyms like LOF in the titles of our services because we have to have those codes to search for things in order to pull them down onto the ticket. So just because your shop management system doesn't have, plain text search, you end up showing the customer something that doesn't make any sense to them. So instead you call the service what it actually is. In this case, I've also added some detail about it just being the first hour of testing. That's a separate webinar we can have about how you talk about testing versus diagnosis. Some of that's just, personal style. And then we see the individual labor operations that are included in that diagnosis. And then obviously this gives you an opportunity to charge for it. So that's over here on the right, 150 bucks. Then next is the repair. So the repair was remove and replace oxygen sensor. That labor was 486 bucks. So presumably it wasn't just taking the oxygen sensor out of the exhaust pipe and screwing another one in. There was some other work to do with it. So we've called that out. And then finally it has the oxygen sensor part included. And that's $855. Not only does this make sense to the customer, they can actually see what it is that you did to the car. It also helps you as a service advisor, remember that you need to be charging for everything. So as you itemize your labor operations, you're going to be more honest with yourself about what you should be billing. It also encourages your advisors to put diagnostics down on the ticket independent from the repairs. Again, an extra 150 bucks in this case. So this is what we're trying to change. Over here on the left is the traditional way. It's cryptive, it's non-descriptive, and it's unbalanced. Over here on the right is where you're going to be going. You want to speak clearly and you want to reflect the services that were actually performed. So how does this actually break down? So what you're going to do is reshape the way that you're presenting customer states. So the first piece of the puzzle is stop putting customer states into the actual service descriptions. Put the customer states somewhere else. If you use Shop-Ware, you'll see how Bryn and I are doing that. If you're using a different system, I don't care where you put it, just get it out of your services. Then you're going to clarify your labor operations. So you're going to write down to the customer every single thing that you're doing on that car, which is to say, what are you selling them? What are they paying for? Again, this gets back to how did you fix their car? And then last but not least, you're going to emphasize digital content. Of course, customers love seeing photos. They like seeing scan data. When you show them that kind of stuff, all of a sudden, not only can they judge for themselves what you're saying, it's not just words, but it's pictures. But additionally, it makes you look a lot more sophisticated, right? Suddenly now they are seeing behind the curtain and they can see what you actually did on the car. We've got some great examples for you. And that, again, allows them to appreciate why you recommended what you recommended, the work that it has actually involved during the course of the repair, and then finally, that the car got fixed. It's not just that the MWL was on and now the MWL is off. It's that they actually can see that the car was repaired. How are you going to do that? So we've got some examples for you. So I'm going to exit my presentation, open up an example repair order. So this is a repair order from my shop, Luscious Garage in San Francisco. This is a classic. This is about as greatest hits as they come. We're working on a 2006 Toyota Prius. And in this case, we start this thing off with a warning light on. Over here on the right-hand side, you see the Shop-Ware's notes feed. And what you've noticed is that my service advisor has literally copy and pasted an email from the customer directly into the notes. So we're not even saying Sally states XYZ. We're literally putting what Sally stated into the notes feed. From there, you get into our diagnostic results. So in this case, we have attachments that are coming out of TextStream. So I can go and see what that specific diagnosis included. And then in addition to that, we will do a recording of the data stream from the car before we do any repairs, showing the state of the hybrid battery. So here we're not even having to apply any load to the battery. We already see that the delta state of charge is 50%. It should be 0 for people who are diagnosing hybrid batteries. This is absolutely classic. If you look at the difference between the green line and the orange line, which is the battery block highest block and the battery block lowest block, you see the difference between those two is almost 1.5 volts. That's way too much. This is a bad battery. So we'll go ahead and capture this and place this on the repair order and then explain it to the customer and then present the sale. In this case, Sally has come to this repair order. She has viewed this detail and she has clicked yes. Yes, please repair my battery for $2,800. We're selling catalytic converters. She passed on that. If you read the notes at the top, she'd had a different repair done in a different shop. And then we sold her a 5,000 mile service because the maintenance light was on. And now you see us going into the details during and after the repair. So after we did our warning light diagnosis, we had promoted these 2 services for the hybrid battery pack onto the ticket. And we see that every 5,000 mile service promoted to the ticket. I want to talk about those briefly. So this is the service for replace hybrid battery pack. At my shop, we do not put master warning light on in the name of the ticket. The name of the ticket, excuse me, the name of the service is replace HV battery pack. And then you see that we are talking about each one of these individual things that we're doing as part of that service. And then it includes a battery. Likewise, when you look at the 5,000 mile service, so this is, again, bread and water. We sell this all day, every day. We don't have a traditional oil change. And in order to justify that value for $161 5,000 mile service, we're talking about every single thing that we're doing as part of that service. We're calling out, parts and fees. And then we have our inspection that we perform as part of that service every single time. And that's built into that service here. So you see that inspection result. And then we've added digital media during the course of the repair and as a result of the repair. So over here, you see the post repair results, which is the battery fixed. So even though this woman has purchased this battery and the battery is installed, we're still going to take the time to do a load test here to show that the battery has been fixed. And in this case, we're pulling the battery way down. And obviously the same 2 blocks are tracking very, very close to each other. And when we look at where this cursor is, we see that the difference between these 2 max and min is now less than 100 millivolts, around 50 millivolts, which is very, very tight. So this is an excellent brand new battery. This looks great. It also helps me know that my technicians installed it correctly. So this is stuff that we're adding just to show value to that customer. And likewise, we've added some photos. So this is the fan before and this is the fan after. That's included in that battery service. And then we also show pictures of the repair taking place. So this is an example of the battery exposed in the back of the car. And then it's removed. And then this is the new battery next to the original battery. There's some additional notes here from the maintenance. And then Sally has posted her own note saying, great, we'll come pick up the car, fantastic. So this is sort of how we're presenting our services to really try and display and demonstrate the attention to detail, the expertise, and also the fact that, we did exactly what we said we did, so that when that customer pulls out of the shop, they're not thinking, I got my warning light turned off. They're thinking, I got my hybrid battery replaced, and I know that I needed my hybrid battery replaced. All that stuff is absolutely priceless. So I have a couple other examples I want to just walk through really quick. And then I'm going to turn it over to you, Bryn. This is an example of another ticket that has a whole series of things that were added to it. So we can just sort of see, like, here's an example of a 120K, again, with an inspection. We installed the theft deterrent for the cat, struts and mounts, and tires, and a washer valve, and front strut bellows and bump stops. Again, each one of these things is getting itemized. And we're doing that because this is not a small ticket. We want to make sure all that detail of what that $3,000 includes is called out. And then additionally, over here, not only are we adding notes about what we found during the inspection, but we're also adding photos of stuff that the customer has already agreed to have done, right? So I'm not selling them a cat plate here. I'm just showing them this is what it looks like after we installed your cat plate. Here's your new spark plugs next to your old spark plugs. Here's the old filter next to the new filter. Again, it takes your technician 5 seconds to snap this on their phone, and it's priceless to the customer. To be able to see this, they understand, yes, I got my work done. You're bringing the customer behind the curtain so they can really see what it is they're paying for. And then this is the fan cleaning again, and so on and so forth. Another example here, this is, I think, a really simple one. This is just a clutch replacement, but another example of let's make sure that we are showing the customer exactly what we did when that transmission was out. So just pull back the curtain, show those details. And I think that's where I'm going to pause. I think Joanna's not as exciting. So in the past, I've done this webinar with Scott Brown. Bryn, of course, knows Scott. A lot of people know Scott. And he and I have gone through all of these examples with sort of an eye towards how are you selling all the different kinds of repairs? Is it maintenance? Is it diagnosis? Is it repair? You're seeing, for example, in this clutch example that we're itemizing everything very clearly. What was really cool is when I reached out to Bryn about doing this webinar here, he and I were talking through kind of what his experience is using these kinds of tools. And he was particularly excited to talk about diagnosis and how you are able to document your diagnostics and bring your customer into that aspect. So I'm really excited to sort of turn it over to you, Bryn, and you can show us some of your examples. Before I get there, I'm going to let you speak to your experience a little bit first. Let me.
Okay, well, first and foremost, I wanted to talk about ASA real quick. ASA is, the whole point of the Automotive Service Association is to support the automotive aftermarket. And that means a great deal to me, but it also means a great deal to me, the company that I get to keep by being part of ASA. So very thankful to be here tonight on behalf of ASA, but also Shop-Ware. I learned about Shop-Ware before it was Shop-Ware. I think it was called High Space at the time, and there were some conversations on IETN. I think it was Travis Decker and yourself. There was probably already a thread happening, but it was going to be a cloud-based system where you could kind of interact with the clients and be able to upload, documents and pictures and videos and stuff like that. And I was excited to see it. At the time, I don't know that I was ready for it, but I did reach out to Carolyn. This is years ago because I was excited to learn more and was hoping that we were going to get to be able to participate in that. And I don't think it was ready. I think you said your very words were it wasn't quite ready for market. And what happened next, I believe, is you decided to bring it to the market and realized that it had to be redone really to be scalable. And I'm thankful that I started using Shop-Ware about 4 years ago. And being very pro industry, I want to be careful for everybody on tonight to make sure that you realize that I didn't agree to do this because of course I like Carolyn and respect her immensely, but I didn't agree to do this for those reasons. I agreed to do it because I truly believe that Shop-Ware is giving us the tools that we need to really demonstrate our expertise, and we've been needing to do that for a long time. So thank you, Shop-Ware, for being there for us. And not to say that you have to have a system like this, but it makes it a lot easier to demonstrate your skills. And beyond that, just being able to have your clients participating in the repair process, I think is awesome. So I named this slide Best Doggone Shop Management Software Tips and Tricks this side of the Mississippi as a joke, because I think that the things that Carolyn brought for us tonight are really important. In fact, when she just mentioned that she thought, she was excited that my take was really about diagnosis. Well, that's kind of what I live, eat, and breathe. Obviously, I'm a shop owner, by the way, Brin Kline from Melbourne, Florida. I own and operate Assured Autoworks. So I do wear all of the same hats that many of the shop owners are on tonight wear. but what I'm passionate about is making the industry better, but also diagnostic work. So when she asked me about, helping and we were trying to kind of navigate what my point would be, it really was about diagnosis, because that's really what I focus on, but also because she mentioned that there are a lot of shops that have been using digital vehicle inspections. They're using it for the upsell process, for the inspection process. And she mentioned that there wasn't enough, in her opinion, there wasn't enough shops using programs like Shop-Ware to highlight the repair process. And I think my shop is going to start changing. Actually, it already has. I've already talked to our team about doing a better job of that. So thank you for that. But so at the time, really thinking about where I could, my territory would be diagnosis. So that's what we're going to cover tonight. You'll advance the slide, please. But before we do, Carolyn touched on it a moment ago. In her examples, she had kind of the not so good and the good. But first thing I want to remind everybody that's on tonight, if you own an independent auto repair shop, if you own a small business, you are part of the community. And I think it's important that you don't forget that. This gentleman here is one of the leading examples. If you don't know much about Frank Loitz from Desert Car Care in Arizona, I would encourage you to take a look at his website. I think it's important for shops to be part of the community, myself included. I look for opportunities to do so. Nowhere near where Frank is, but I do think it's important, and I'd like to do more, and I look at Frank as a leading example. But in this case, he's clearly talking to a group of young women pre-pandemic. Unfortunately, it's going to be hard to do some of these things moving forward, at least short term. But you are part of the community, and I think it's important. And maybe you can't, everybody's busy, right? Throughout tonight, you're going to hear about all the stuff that you should be doing. Being part of the community is one of them, but maybe you can't, maybe it's tough. Maybe you're having a hard time finding the time. Obviously, most of us are used to putting out fires all day, and we're tired. Well, it can start with something simple, is instead of using, if you'll advance the slide, Carolyn. No, there's some animation, sorry about that. Instead of using the customer states, just use their name. It could be that simple. You're part of the community. Your clients they're not named customers. Customer, they're named Jim, they're named Carolyn, they're named Suzanne. Use their name. That's a very good start, and it really doesn't take very little effort on your side to do so. People like to hear their name. They like to see their name. And especially if you're using a system like Shop-Ware, where the client is collaborating with the repair process, which is part of the beauty of this. It kind of creates the image of transparency, which I think our industry needs, and professionalism, but also they get to feel like they're part of the repair process. So if you're using a system like this, where they're monitoring it along with you during the repair process, but even if you're not, but especially if you do, use their name in it, talk to them, and all the conversations or all the communications that you're putting within the system, make sure that you're reminding yourself to talk to them, because they're going to see it, and ultimately you're helping them with their vehicle. So go ahead and advance, please. So this is just a bad example. I mean, I think it's not that we're bad people. We just get used to doing this. We get used to doing the C/S. It's what we've seen all the time, and I don't think we often think about it. This is a bad example. If you'll go ahead and advance. And this is really what you should be doing. It's just that simple. Use their name. So go ahead and advance. Now going back in, we're going to go right to the diagnostic part of the process now. I think inspections, the last couple of years, DVIs have been pretty cool. I think it's awesome that Shop-Ware, to my knowledge, is the first ones to utilize anything that resembles a DVI and beyond, in my opinion, and incorporates it as part of the management system instead of having a separate module that has to integrate. But because DVI has become so popular, that's, again, like Carolyn was saying, that's kind of been the focal point. For me, Um, Diagnostic work is the most challenging. Everybody talks about how advanced the vehicles are that we're working on right now. And it's clear that it's a very expensive service. It's probably the most expensive service that we should be providing. But if you think about how much training it takes and how long it takes to really grow a technician that is confident and can consistently and accurately diagnose vehicles, I don't need to say really much more. Everybody knows how difficult that can be. So if you're like me, you know, we live in the real world. I like to think that our shop is my dream is really to be a beacon of what the automotive repair industry should be like, and that's a non-stop, ongoing, process. But we live in a real world, and no matter how hard you try, things happen. And that makes it difficult for me to answer the phone and be super confident every time a client calls. So for that reason, I hire someone else, and hopefully that they're able to portray that confidence better than I am. And that's their job, and I think they're doing pretty good at it. But if many of you are probably can oftentimes, at least in my experience, shop owners and even service advisors, it can be difficult to really have that confidence, especially when it comes to diagnosing cars. I think what happens in our industry, because they're so complex and complicated, because it's such a difficult process, we find ourselves in a position where we misdiagnose the vehicle. And if that happens often enough, and it can be very difficult to be confident about it. So you may be asking yourself, I don't know. One of the things that really drive me crazy is when shops don't charge for diagnostic work. Well, I think to myself, well, if they don't know how to diagnose, then maybe it's not fair for them to charge for diagnostic work. I'm here to tell you that it goes the other way. I think that you're going to have to charge for your test. And continue, don't stop. You're going to have to invest in your people, send them to training. Hopefully you can, the webinars are crazy, right, guys? There's like nonstop. It's almost overwhelming right now. So definitely, if you're not taking advantage of it, there are a lot of great webinars out there. Make sure that you are participating and taking part of those. Make sure your team knows about them as well. Some of them are even like luncheon hour scenarios where you can have your team take a 12-to-1 or whatever and watch some of these things. So don't stop. Invest in your team. Make sure that they're getting the training they need, because in my opinion, when they are getting it, that's one step for them to be really, really happy with their career choice, is when they I think many folks get excited about diagnostic work, technicians that is, when they start to get good at it and they start to really understand it. But invest in your team, but you're going to have to charge in order to do so. So if you advance, please.
Yeah, we were talking about this, and like, realistically, this is we're perpetually having to work on improvements here, right? Like, cars are getting ever more complex. We're always learning how to work on them. And we're likewise improving the way we can communicate with our customers and share with them what we have found and what we suggest that they do about it. So, these are parallel efforts, and there's no destination.
So if you're going to invest in your team and you're going to charge for diagnosis, which you should be doing both of those things, then you're going to be in a position, hopefully sooner than later, to be able to document that process. So it's very important, if you're going to charge for diagnostic work, that you show them the process. You show them what it is that you're charging them for, and you get the opportunity to tell them what they've won, and that's pretty cool.
Did I break out here?
What's that?
Break out? Should we go look at some of your?
Yeah.
Let's show them what they've won.
Show them what they've won. I have a couple examples of some of our invoices, and probably neither of them are super complicated, but I think they do a pretty decent job of documenting those testing, the tests that we perform to pinpoint their concerns, so that we can help them solve their problems, vehicle problems anyways. So this is Janet Gray, and this is a 2014 GMC Terrain. And there was no, if you look to the right-hand side, you'll see that it's Janet States, Again, we're not using customer states. We're using the customer's name. That our vehicle's check engine indicator illuminated over the weekend. Please check and advise. Now, the best that I recall, there was no drivability symptoms. I'm surprised to not see that on there. But initially at our shop, when we have a check engine light or a drivability problem, anytime that we're in a position where we think we're going to have to spend some time testing or diagnosing, whichever word you prefer to use, we offer an assessment for free. I think it's important to charge for diagnostic work, and for years out of the gate, we warned them before they even came in that they're going to pay for an hour. Well, reality is, I live it, eat, and breathe this stuff, and I would say there's plenty of times where an hour is not going to be good enough, and in some cases, an hour is too much. So we offer an assessment. What that does for us is allows us to look at the vehicle and get a better understanding of what kind of time frame or what kind of tests we think are going to be needed to pinpoint their concern. So that's what we've done here. We've retrieved the fault codes for them, kind of did a visual assessment, and at that point we decided we needed to sell our client, Janet, a level 1 testing package in order to pinpoint the cause of her concern, which is a check engine light, which is a P0013 and a P0014, and their camshaft position faults. I think if you'll hit those again for me. Okay, so we have a circuit code here for B camshaft bank 1, and the next one is the same camshaft position timing over advanced or system performance bank 1. So we have a circuit code and a performance code. And your technicians are working through this. They probably should recognize at this point that if they have a circuit code and a performance code, then the performance code generally would be caused by the circuit issue and not the other way around. Not always the case, but that's what we're thinking at this point. So again, we sold level 1 testing to pinpoint her concern. And the next step is we put a scan tool on the vehicle. I think that next, so at this point, we're focused on cam timing. And I think at the top left, exhaust cam position command, intake position command, and over to the top right, exhaust camshaft position and intake camshaft position. And then below that is exhaust camshaft variance and intake cam variance. Is that it? Was it just that short?
Is that short?
Okay, you'll see that at the top left, it was 77%, 66%, but if you see at the top right, there's no phasing. So the engine computer is trying to phase that exhaust cam, but in the top right, we can see in the data that it's not happening. And if you look, try it one more time. I want to see that exhaust cam variance. Exhaust cam variance, you'll see here the third PID down on the right from the top. You can see it go up to 16 degrees, I believe is what it was. So basically what that means is that the controller is not happy that that exhaust cam is not phasing. You can see that it's seeing that it's 16 degrees from its target. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because it's pretty simple to date. That first couple captures there were just the fault codes, and it's just a, if we're not getting paid for testing, I use a $60 code reader. Yeah. But once we get testing approved, you'll see that next capture, that video just there, was us analyzing some data. The next capture, this is partially based off of our experience, and I want you guys to recognize this as well. Just because we may already have a pretty good idea what's going on, we may even know, with a pretty high level of confidence. In this case, we probably did. It doesn't mean you do not charge for it, in my opinion. I think it's kind of like an artist. There's some jokes out there, but I think it's like an artist. You think about how much you have to invest in your team to get to the point where they have a pretty good understanding of what's going on before they look at the car. There's value in that, and I think that it's important to know. So in this case, we were already pretty sure we were dealing with an exhaust solenoid, the camshaft phasing solenoid for the exhaust. So there's a lot of tests that we could have performed, but this is really quick. You can just put a DVOM on it in the resistance mode, or ohm mode, and check the resistance of it. The specification, I think, is documented somewhere within these captures, but in this case, it's over 7,000 ohms. I think it is the third one here. We took a picture, the one before that.
Yep, I'm going backwards, sorry. Pardon me.
All right. Yeah, that's it. So there's documentation of what the specification should be. And from you see the images, that was over 7,000 ohms, and we should be looking at like 8 to 13 ohms. And if you look at the next one, I think it's the other solenoid. Not that one, but the one before it. I apologize. Yeah. So this one's at 13 ohms. So it's got two solenoids for exhaust cam and intake cam phasing. And we're just demonstrating what it should look like from the one that's not causing the fault code compared to the one that is causing the fault code that is well outside of the specifications. And the text above it, I won't bore you by reading it. But the text above it basically clearly explains that. And oftentimes what we'll do too is each paragraph will reference to the number of attachments that's below it. And then the final picture there after that specification image is us just showing that, yes, we know that the solenoid is open, but we want to make sure that the circuits between the ECM and those solenoids are still good. In this case, we're actually load testing, but we're also scoping it to make sure that that ECM is actually attempting to command that solenoid. So at that point, we're very confident. ECM's doing what it needs to do. The circuits are good, but the solenoid is pretty much open, and that the solenoid needs to be replaced. So we gave her an estimate on replacing the exhaust camshaft, timing control solenoid, and then afterwards we made sure that we documented. I think it showed the first one there. Carolyn is showing that it's 10.83 ohms now. So if you'll recall before, 8 to 13 is what it should be. And you can see now it's well within range. And this is a scan tool capture. If you look at the exhaust camshaft position on the right, you'll see that it's phasing. And if you look at the variance, third one down, you'll see that there's 0 variance, where before we had up to 16 at one point. So the car is happy at that point. And we were able to show that and explain it in our notes as well. So, so that's that one. There's a kind of an interesting note below that, but it's probably not relevant for this case study.
This is really great, Brennan. What is remarkable is that, you know, you're doing this work anyway to verify, and you can talk about it in notes or write it in some tech worksheet and the customer never sees it. The minute you snap some of these photos and you're able to show them to the customer, immediately they get to see all the tools that you're leveraging inside of the shop. It also is covering your butt. I know that there's some compliance rules in Florida. I know them well because they're very dear to my heart, like the ones in California. And being able to show this stuff and be able to really justify how you arrive at your conclusion is absolutely amazing.
That's a good point, that kind of CYA part, because you can, by documenting it, you can show, you know, because cars are complicated, right? You fix one thing, and we did a pretty good, thorough job of making sure we understood that whole system, right? But it doesn't mean that, you know, with cars, if there's a monitor, a test that the computer runs and it fails, there may be other tests and monitors that it will not run. It stops running them until it sees that system happy. So we see that every day, right? We fix one thing and something else happens, especially for those of us that are not living in the Rust Belt and we have 12-year-old cars or older. So very good point. This is a 98 Jeep Wrangler, and this is Noel. And this is a first-time client, and he's a young guy, and he has a no crank condition. It happens to be a manual transmission, so because he's young and strapping, he can still push start this thing. So he's been struggling to try to fix this himself for quite a while. The first time, I don't answer the phone much at my shop, but I did in this case, and I could hear the pain in his voice. I could, and it was kind of endearing. You know, we recognize sometimes that there are those types of clients that may not be big money spenders for us, but we have to be careful, myself included sometimes, to remember that we are part of the community and we're there to help. And this is one of those scenarios where I just felt like, man, I've got to help this guy out. Obviously we did. So he brought it to us. And the same thing, we did an initial assessment here and there was nothing obvious to us. And so we decided to tell him to give us, you know, to approve. we asked him to approve level 1 testing in this case as well. In hindsight, it probably should have been a little higher testing level because there was actually 3 things wrong with this vehicle. But again, it was a young man. I kind of felt, I know we shouldn't think, probably it's not the best for business, but I felt like I wanted to help this guy out. But anyways, these next couple of notes here. So the first one, he has a no crank issue. He's replaced the battery several times. He's bypassed the neutral safety switch under the dash. He's put a new starter on. Ignition switch has been replaced. And at that point, he's asking me, he even asked me, you know, what do you think is happening? Man, this is not going to be something I'm going to be able to just stand here and tell you. You've clearly done a lot of work to this thing. So we did a visual assessment. We told him that we're going to need level 1 testing to pinpoint the concern. During the process, he had asked a couple more questions, and toward the end, we were able to get some of those other things resolved for him as well that were seemingly unrelated. But the first, I think you'll probably have to work through if you'll see that section right there, you'll see that we have it kind of laid out. First image, we reference the wiring diagram to understand the circuit, and then the next paragraph, we talk about the second image. And when I'm doing this, I try to do that way. I try to put the pictures in, attachments in the order that I'm doing it to kind of follow along, you know, follow the diagnostic process, and then I'll try to go back in later and just describe the pictures. So this is the first capture, and this is clearly going to be a circuit issue, or I should say most likely. So we had to look at a wiring diagram to really understand this circuit. And then the next deal, this had the wrong cover. And so we had to go and try to make sure that we understood which relays were what. And this was able to, I think we had to Google this. Yeah, if you see, this came from Pinterest. It wasn't easy to find this in service information, as odd as that is. So use all the tools that you have available to you, Google, YouTube, whatever. And don't shame anybody for doing so. Anyways, we have a tool here. We've removed the starter relay just to see if we have, so when you have a relay, it's you have a control side of the circuit, and then you have the switch side of the circuit. The control side is what turns on and off. The relay is basically a switch, and the control side are the low current circuits that allow the high current switch to function. So by having this tool, it's called U-Activate, and you can see that green LED in the middle. And by putting that tool, in this case, by putting that tool in place of the relay, we can see that the LED is illuminating. What that's telling us is the ignition switch is good, the neutral safety switch is good, that going all the way to the relay is good, and I don't remember exactly. I probably look at that diagram again, but we knew that all of the control side of that circuit was working, but it wasn't. We clearly were still not, you know, experiencing a no crank condition. So if you look at the next image there, what we didn't see immediately, but after we pulled that tool back out, is there's supposed to be 4 terminals there, and one of them is clearly missing. So if you'll advance to the next, and if you look at that picture, these pictures too, initially when I started putting these pictures up, I just left the pictures alone, but I try to do my best to annotate them. It just makes it easier for the client to understand the process. But if you can see that red wire with that terminal, it's not pushed, it's not seated all the way. And so we pulled that apart and found that that was the case. And so we basically held it in place as we put the relay back in, I think is the next. So yeah, temporarily we just held it in place while we put the relay back in so we can see what we had. In the next video, I think.
Okay, we've fixed that temporarily, but yet still no start.
I didn't realize my voice was that high. Is it that high tonight?
Sounds great.
So we still had a problem. So what was the next deal there? I think. Okay, so after, I think that was a video. So then we checked the relay and we determined that we were missing a power. So we basically went back to the wiring diagram to see what where that circuit was coming from. In this case, it's that fuse that's square, circled out there. So we found, let's see here what this one is.
This is our fuse 2 in the PDC, which feeds our power relay or starter relay. The battery voltage there. Battery voltage.
So we had battery voltage on one side of the fuse and none on the other. So the fuse is obviously blown. If you'll advance to the next attachment there. Is that a video?
It's a video floating.
Fuse doesn't look bad, obviously. Put a 60 amp in there temporarily. As soon as I did, you could hear the fan come on. And now we have power at the starter terminal in the relay. I should say in the starter relay terminal.
You know, I noticed that this guy has come to the ticket and, was commenting and approved the additional diagnosis himself. Being able to share all this with him, I'm sure brought him right into the repair, and he was able to really understand what he had missed, because he, of course, is going to be super suspicious because he's been all over this car. And so to be able to really help him understand what you found so that he could like rest easy and know that the car was actually fixed. I mean, that's just that's a very thoughtful, taking the time to grab all those vids and post them and explain them all. So we have another example here that's also a lot of content, but has a much higher grand total. But you are obviously doing this guy.
Yeah, I knew that he wasn't going to be a money spinner. And the last one that we had documented wasn't a big ticket either, but that was a regular client, and we've done a pretty good job of keeping her vehicle up to date, so we didn't really need to do anything else for her. But yeah, so I think there's a video that you might have missed there. I apologize for all the videos, but we got that fuse replaced and there was still nothing happening. But you can't hear it in the video, even though I say you should be able to hear it. You can't hear it, but you have now a click where there was nothing before. So we had to kind of basically go back and reassess again. And basically what we did at this point is a visual inspection. And I'm looking at this starter, and it looks to me like he's got a chassis ground bolted to the the hot side of the starter motor. So I did I took a picture of it, annotated it, circled the area, and then the next picture shows kind of a crappy image, but it shows what it should look like. I actually pulled that off online as well by doing a Google image search. And then the next image is kind of after we've resolved that. We put the chassis ground you can kind of see it above the starter there. And there should have been a video. I thought I took a video of it actually starting after that, but it didn't. I didn't actually get the video. So that was that process. And yeah, I documented it because I get to some degrees because I'm a nerd, but I think it obviously builds value in that repair process. And like you said, gave him confidence. And at Vision this year, Scott Brown pulled us aside and we did a quick video about Shop-Ware. And he asked, if we hear anything from our clients. And I told him at that point that we do, but really the coolest part of it is we don't have to hear it a lot of times. A lot of times we see it in the reviews. People will mention the reviews. In this case, we did hear it. He was very excited about being able to see that diagnostic process documented on the invoice, and he was able to see it live as the process went on. So,
should we do one more? You good?
If we have time.
I love this. Is just great.
This is kind of a good one because, and it goes back to what I mentioned a moment ago, is even if you already have a pretty good idea, like Carolyn said with the hybrid, I mean, her shop is, one of the most recognized hybrid specialists there are. But even though she has a pretty good idea what's going on, we need to know for sure. And for that time, we need to make sure we're charging for it. In this case, it's a 2012 GMC Sierra. And the reason I bring that up is because what we found wrong with this vehicle is not uncommon at all for this platform. But the client had brought it into us because it was running rough. And unfortunately, I don't, what I can tell, I don't know that we did a good job. I think if you scroll down we did get some fault codes initially there, and we try to get all of the fault codes from all of the modules and put them on the ticket. That way, we don't have to remember or store that anywhere else. It's there. We can look back and it's there. And going back to that CYA thing, if we take care of the main concern, and sometimes when you're diagnosing cars, you will have pages of fault codes, and some of those concerns are just, they may not need to be investigated, but if maybe you made a bad choice and you didn't investigate it, and it comes back at some point, maybe a few months down the road. And if you've documented it, at that point, you can go back and see, was that a code that was there before? So that kind of help you potentially.
Baseline.
Yeah. In this case, it didn't, have the oil it needed, and Carlos just kind of made a couple comments early on.
Jumping ahead.
Well, I don't think you are jumping ahead, really. That's kind of one point that I want to make too, is go ahead and click on it, and then we'll go back to and explain it. Click on that one and then the next one. The other way.
So we're jumping down to the end of this.
We're jumping down. The reason we are is just we're human beings, right? So we kind of make mistakes. In this case, we didn't do a good job of documenting the images in the right order. This is what we found, and we'll explain that in a moment. But if you advance to the next couple, you'll show some scan data captures and fault codes and stuff there, and then
these guys.
Yeah, that one and the next one. And there's really not much really to go over. You can see cylinder 6 has 128 misfires on this capture, just showing that it is in fact cylinder number 6 that's causing the vehicle to run rough. And I don't even know what the next image is, Carolyn, if you'd look at it. And that's I think that's, maybe one was history and one was current. So you can see again, just more proof that cylinder number 6 is our guy. So we need to go after cylinder number 6. And there is some missing stuff there, which is okay, but there's some scan data that would help us to kind of lead us in one direction. It's all about being in the right funnel, and that's another topic probably, but by looking at scan data, we were able to determine, and it basically, again, because we're pretty familiar with this platform and what we were probably going to be expecting, we were able to determine that was probably going to be a mechanical issue. And if you'll click those scope captures, Carolyn, again, the third one probably. So go there, one more, there you go. For those of you on the call that aren't familiar, the blue trace, this is using an oscilloscope with a current clamp. So basically what we're doing is measuring the starter current while we disable the engine from running as we crank it over. And many of you that have been in the field long enough to know that if you have a mechanical issue causing a cylinder misfire, if you disable the engine from starting and go to crank it over, you can usually hear the change in crank rhythm, and that can kind of tell you might be dealing with a cylinder contribution issue. Well, by using the starter current, current probe to measure the starter current on an oscilloscope, we can see that, and that's in this blue trace. If you look kind of just left of center, there's one blue hump that's representing cylinder number 6, and that's really low starter current to turn that engine over. And I don't want to get geeky on you guys, but as the starter is turning the engine over, when each piston comes up at top dead center compression stroke, both valves are closed. So that's the hardest time that starter has to work. And because we know that, we can use that at our advantage and use this blue capture. Each one of those peaks represents a top dead center compression for each cylinder. And we can see cylinder 6 is low by adding an ignition sync, which is in red there, and just using the firing order to determine which cylinder is what. It's kind of a messy one. There's a little more going on there than that, but that's kind of the overall synopsis of that. But if you go back to the captures before that, once we knew we were dealing with a mechanical issue, now we use the same scope, but we use a pressure transducer in cylinder number 6 so we can see, and the intake manifold. And that's what we have here. The red trace is the ignition event for that cylinder. The gold trace there is a pressure transducer in the cylinder. Instead of using a compression gauge, that would only show us peak compression. So all we would see in a compression gauge is that this is less than 4 PSI cranking compression, or in this case, running compression. That's not a lot of information. That would tell us it's low, but it wouldn't tell us anything else. So here's something that's pretty interesting. This was a aftermarket warranty job. At this point, you see a cylinder that's low on compression, causing a running rough condition. You're faced with having to explain to the warranty company what you found and kind of see what they want to do. Because the first step, right, is having the client approve testing before the warranty company will approve anything else. But the bad part is, the good part is you're doing high level testing like this. Again, you're investing in your people and they're going to training. They'll get here if they're not already. If you're doing high level testing like this, it's really exciting to be able to see what's going on. Traditionally, if you have a low cylinder, you might do a leak down test. And what that would do is you would put another special set of gauges on there. You would fill the cylinder with air and you'd be able to tell, and one of the gauges would show the amount of leakage in that cylinder, because that's what's happening. Most of the time it causes low compression is some kind of leak. And basically with that air in the cylinder, you would listen at the intake manifold or throttle body. If air's coming out of there, if you could hear air coming out of there, that might be a leak past the intake valve. If you hear air in the tailpipe, that would be a leak past the exhaust valve. If you hear air coming out of the cooling system, or if you see bubbles coming out of the cooling system, that would be like a head gasket scenario. And then the dipstick would be the cylinder leakage past the rings and cylinder walls down into the crankcase. So that would be a traditional test. In this case, you wouldn't have gotten anything. And the reason for that is because there was no leak. It's just a simple situation where the intake valve is not opening. And this trace told us that. You can see, I can't get into the main details of the yellow trace to tell you that, but I guess the biggest thing I could tell you is that over to the right of that capture, it looks like a U. Instead of having sharp changes in pressure, you just see this U shape. That indicates the intake valve never opened. But in the green trace, that's a pressure transducer in the intake. And you can see the pressure rise during that cylinder's intake stroke. The reason for that is because the intake valve is not opening and that cylinder is not contributing, is not helping pull air into the cylinder. So the manifold pressure rises during that capture. This is kind of nerding out a little bit, but I think if you take the time to document these captures, like Carolyn said, that you're already taking anyways, and maybe annotating it if you can, and explaining it, I think that there's huge confidence there. But here's the problem. Talking to the warranty company, I said, well, what would you like me to do? They're telling me that we're not giving them a diagnosis. Here's the bad part of this. You have your team are ready to go. They're rock stars and they're doing taking captures like this, and they're able to see what's going on without tearing it down. Think about how awesome that is, that you now know you do not have to disassemble an engine to know what's wrong with it. You know what's wrong with it within a few minutes getting a capture like this. Here's the bad part. Warranty companies at this point don't recognize that. So they're telling us that we don't have a diagnosis. So I'm on the phone with a guy and I said, I don't appreciate you saying that I don't have a diagnosis, because I do. I can recognize that you don't understand these testing techniques, and that's fine. I said, if we didn't do these tests, what would we do? We have a compression that has 4 PSI. What would you like us to do? I said, and I was hoping that he would say a cylinder leakage test, and I can tell him that wouldn't have told him anything. But he said, we would expect you to disassemble. Think about that. How many times have you or your team disassembled an engine and visually you cannot see anything? It happens pretty often. So in this case, we were able to document, even though the warranty company didn't understand it. This car sat here a long time because of the fight with the warranty company. But the owner at that point, right, the owner has to decide, is it really the shop's lack of confidence, or is it the warranty company? So by documenting this stuff and talking about this with the client, he didn't have to make a decision. He knew that he could be confident in our diagnosis, that he had to really kind of steer his frustration toward the warranty company. So that's that one.
Yeah, this is really great. And this is, continuing to show the detail that you're adding. And anyone who's had to deal with an aftermarket warranty company knows what this looks like. And being able to put all this on the ticket. And then obviously, you ultimately got paid. So you sold through the additional work after you disassembled, put it back together. You had some additional stuff that you found during the course of the teardown.
Yeah, so when we did disassemble, the main failure is an internal failure in the lifter. So the lifter itself is it's collapsed. It's not allowing the valve to open. But this is the other thing that happens on these all the time too. You can see the cam lobe and the lifter roller are both pitted pretty heavily on that valve, which helps.
So I want to just point out that not only is this just, every single one of these examples, sometimes it's maintenance, sometimes it's repair, sometimes it's diagnosis. In all these cases, you've got a universal mechanism for capturing all that detail and communicating it. What I also want to note is that in this case, there is no inspection, there is no checklist. So there is no requisite filing of all of this detail under a parent checklist item, because it's not appropriate, right? You're just trying to figure out what's going on with the car, and being able to have a checklist when appropriate is great. Also great to just be able to communicate your diagnostics in whatever duration they may be. So this is really, 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 really interesting. We're getting into, this happens when we do the demonstrations with Scott's ROs too. I mean, Scott brings these incredible ADAS case studies and stuff, and they're really impressive repair orders. But the idea here is that we're doing this work. We are impressive, and being able to show this to your customer or to their warranty company is ultimately going to benefit you in the long run. And it stops being a discussion about, you know, what is the shop saying? The shop's not the problem. The car's the problem. Here's the information. What do you want to do about it? And then you can let people make their decisions.
I wanted to touch on something too. I think it's like an elephant in the room potentially, if you don't mind. Maybe you're looking at this and saying, I don't see how we're going to have time to do this. This is, most of what you're seeing here is really me, and it's, again, what I live, eat, and breathe. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. So maybe your technician is going to do more of a bullet point system and just have your service advisor, or whoever may, you know, handle the communications that go out on this, kind of start to tell the story from those bullet points.
Mm-hmm. Or talk to text or whatever the case may be. You can start by getting it on there and then kind of consume it. This is really great, Bryn. Thank you so much. So let me take us back to the presentation. You've definitely showed them what they've won, and your customers have won a lot, which is awesome. I did want to do a quick view on services reporting and analysis. I know we're at time. I'm going to take a couple more minutes, and actually I think I'll take a couple more minutes. I was going to skip over it, and then whenever I do that, someone says, hey, why didn't you do the thing that you said you were going to do? You don't want to miss anything. So I just wanted to call out some additional benefits of being able to itemize your services. Not only do you have the ability to demonstrate them or show them to your customer, but also you have the opportunity to report on them. So this is a tab on Shop-Ware's analytics branch that actually allows me to investigate my profitability on the services that I do the most common, the ones that are the least and most efficient, and then I can drill into individual reports on, for example, how did I do on the services that I did specifically on Prius, or whatever the case may be. And this is what happens again when you pull your customer states out of the description of the service and you move it into the commentary, and then suddenly you can actually start reporting on what did you actually sell and how well did you sell it. So these are all the things that you can do when you start to restructure the way you're presenting your work to your customer.